Hello, and welcome to another chapter in Contemporary Issues in Special Education. Today's chapter, we're going to cover Chapter 5, which is Classroom Management. How does the lack of classroom management training impact students in early childhood classrooms? A little background in this is I know as a middle school teacher, if students, once they get to middle school, have not learned proper school routines, classroom rules, how to appropriately behave at school, once they get to middle school, it's really hard to reteach those positive behavior habits, those classroom routines, and just in general school rules and how to appropriately behave in school. So a little introduction into this chapter is early childhood classrooms are the very first chance that these children get to learn the proper school behavior, proper school rules, and school routines. It's the first chance for them to develop positive classroom behaviors. Therefore, it's important to teach positive classroom behaviors, promote positive boundaries, and manage different destructive behaviors. In these early childhood classrooms, it's super important to steer students away from disruptive behaviors, from inappropriate behaviors, anything that might disrupt the learning environment, the safety, and all around the positive environment of the classroom and of the learning environment. So, a little bit on classroom management. Classroom management is the foundation of all other classroom objectives. Without classroom management, nothing productive will happen in the classroom. Without these students behaving appropriately, without them having a positive outlook on the classroom, without them knowing the classroom routines and classroom rules, nothing productive and none of the learning is going to take place. We need to manage the classroom, manage behaviors before we can start teaching and providing a positive learning environment. Teachers need to be able to manage a variety of behaviors in order to have a productive classroom. That starts with appropriate classroom rules, classroom expectations, and how they ultimately want the students to act in the classroom. This happens in early childhood classrooms early on. Once they develop that positive behavior, they know how to properly act, then the learning environment can take place. The reason why I chose this chapter is I am a firm believer in the importance of classroom management. I have seen how being able to manage a variety of behaviors can affect the learning environment. I've seen firsthand some teachers that have been able to properly manage multiple behaviors, multiple disruptive behaviors along with positive behaviors, and their learning environment is always positive, it's productive, and the students are ultimately learning. But I've also seen teachers who have not been able to properly manage disruptive behaviors, therefore it disrupts the rest of the class, no learning happens, and ultimately the teachers spending a majority of their time trying to redirect the class to the lesson and away from the disruptive behavior. So I'm a firm believer in having set classroom rules and classroom expectations that the students from day one know and expect themselves to behave in a certain way. If there's none of those set classroom rules and the students just think that they can behave however they want to behave to get attention or maybe to impress another student or just kind of to draw the attention away from the lesson and on them, then no learning is going to take place. It's going to be all the attention is going to be on that disruptive student and not on the lesson, which is not what we want. A few pros and cons of effective classroom management. There are tons of pros, but I'm going to hit the 5 top ones that I think are super important. Number 1, it provides a safe and productive learning environment. I know a lot of students come from homes where they feel safe at school, so as long as every behavior is being managed, the learning environment is positive, then you're providing them a safe and a productive learning environment that they enjoy to be in. whether that be early childhood, whether that be onto middle school, onto high school. I think the foundation starts at early childhood. They feel safe there. They're going to feel safe in school from then on. Number 2, it gives all students the opportunity to learn. There's no disruptive behaviors going on. All students are going to be engaged. They're going to be learning. And they're going to be ultimately building that educational background to further their education or just be a productive member of society. Number 3, having a good classroom management strategy helps you be able to manage all behaviors, whether they're positive, negative, whatever they might be. Having that effective classroom management plus effective classroom rules and objectives and expectations makes you be able to manage all behaviors, redirect them. They know direct consequences for their behaviors, so they're less likely to act out. Number 4, it allows all types of students to learn. This allows students with disabilities manage their behaviors and be a productive member of the class, allowing all students that ability to learn and to engage in classroom conversations. And number 5, it provides a productive classroom. As long as all behaviors are managed, there's an effective classroom management strategy in place, then all students are going to be productive, all students are going to be learning, they're going to be engaged, therefore being a full-on productive classroom. Cons. I honestly believe there are no cons to having a effective classroom management plan. There's a few cons to developing that classroom management plan. These include it can be very hard to develop and implement a plan that works. I know in my classroom I've gone through a few different plans, kind of testing them out. I've failed a few times, but failure always makes you successful in the end. So if you fail on a plan, make changes and then implement a new plan, and ultimately you will find a plan that is effective. It's also hard to carry out rules at times. I know there's sometimes I like to have a fun, interactive, safe place for my students to come in a special education classroom to where they feel like they can tell me when they're struggling, when they're having hard times at home. I feel like I kind of have an open classroom, but at times students can sort of take advantage of that and bend the rules a little bit. So it's hard to carry out the rules at times, especially when there's some students at vulnerable times in their lives. But ultimately, I have my classroom management, classroom expectations posted very big in my classroom, and the students know that. So even if they're at a vulnerable state in their life, I can say, hey, so-and-so, you need to remember rule number 3, be respectful of others, or whatever it might be. Also, without a classroom management plan, it can provide a negative environment. So if you have no classroom expectations, no strategy to manage different behaviors can be going on at the same time, which can clash, which can cause some confrontation. It can cause disruption. And then ultimately your classroom is not a positive learning environment, but more of a negative, non-productive environment. So those are some things to keep in mind when you're developing your plan. It is going to be hard. You're going to have to do some trial and errors. But ultimately failure is going to turn into success in the end. You're going to see what works, what doesn't work. And then you're going to be able to develop a really good plan to make sure your classroom is productive, all students are behaving appropriately, and this starts early childhood. I mean, those kids, as soon as they come into the classroom, they need to understand there's an appropriate way to behave in school, and then there's an inappropriate way, and that's going to carry on throughout their school year. So if they don't learn it at an early age, once they get to like me in middle school, it's going to be really hard to teach those positive behaviors and for them to change their habits. To where if they learn them at an early age, then it's a piece of cake, easy peasy for me to have a positive learning environment for them because they already understand the expectations. A few myths about it is having a set classroom routine and classroom expectation can decrease problem behaviors. So some people think that no matter what, these students are going to have a problem behavior. No matter what your classroom management plan is, no matter what you try to do, they're always going to have those problem behaviors, which is not the case. If there is a set classroom routine, classroom management strategy from day one, it's going to decrease those problem behaviors. And ultimately, if they understand that from year to year, they're not going to show you those problem behaviors, because they're going to understand, hey, Miss So-and-so has these rules, and if I don't follow them, I'm going to get in trouble, or I'm going to have to go visit the principal, or there's going to be some kind of consequence, so I better not act inappropriately. Another myth is managing behaviors can improve the overall learning environment. Some people believe that behavior has nothing to do with learning, but in reality, it does. If everyone's behaving appropriately, then everyone's engaged and everyone is overall learning. So that is a few things about managing behavior. I kind of touched on both early childhood classrooms plus kind of my own personal experience, because this is a huge thing. I do have some students who still struggle with problem behaviors. It's just something we all have to work together to manage. We all have to be on the same page, have the same kind of consequences, because if one teacher holds consequences and another doesn't, that's not going to help the problem behavior. So it's just something we all have to manage at times. I know it can be hard, it can be frustrating, but ultimately, if we're all on the same page, we're all on the same team, we all want what's best for the student, then ultimately it's going to be a positive learning environment for all. So thank you again for listening, and stay tuned for the next video.